Hi everyone, my name is Leah Heiner, and my presentation today is going to be about the Swat Valley post-Taliban. First, I want to cover a little bit of history and what the Taliban did while they were in the Swat Valley. Taliban first entered the Swat Valley in October of 2007. They began to take control of the Swat Valley over the next couple of months. The Pakistan Army became involved, and the two forces struggled to take the Swat Valley. Over the following months, the Pakistan Army was able to take back many of the cities that had been taken by the Taliban. But the Taliban was never driven out all the way. Unfortunately, the Taliban slowly re-entered the Swat Valley over the following months and started taking control of the security forces. By February of 2009, the Taliban had regained control of most of the Swat Valley. This is a point that we recently read about in Malala, where many of the people left Swat because they were living their lives in fear. A truce was supposed to take place on February 16th of that year that allowed Sharia law to take place and that there would be a ceasefire. Malala specifically talks about this time as they were very scared, and when the ceasefire happened, there was hope that it would start getting better, but nothing changed. Much devastation took place at this point. There's a quote that says, "In Swat, men and women deemed un-Islamic were killed by the Taliban and their bodies dumped on the street. Hundreds of girls' schools were destroyed before the army outset the militants in 2009. They started their inhumane activities. They slaughtered people in the square of Mingora, and they killed a lot of innocent people. Their first target was schools, especially the girls' schools. They destroyed a lot of girls' schools, more than 400 girls' schools, and more than 50,000 students suffered under the Taliban. Pakistan military drove the Taliban out of the region in July of 2009. Thousands of people left the Swat Valley when the destruction began. Later that month, after the army drove the Taliban out, the refugees began their journey back with the protection of soldiers and helicopters. In Swat, the officials had to carefully plan the refugees' return. There were thousands of people and they had to prepare for that. Pakistani and international aid officials said that they had mapped out how the government would ensure the orderly and voluntary return of the residents to the valley and surrounding areas. In these areas, there were really no police or local government. Schools and clinics were all destroyed, and many houses were destroyed or damaged in the fighting. Shani Khan, an electrician in his 30s, said he heard that his house had been damaged. Still, it is a great feeling to be able to go back home, he said. The people were ready to come back home, but their homes, sadly, were not the same. As the people were returning back, they really did realize at that point that the Taliban had left the Swat a mess. The valley's main town, Mingora, bore the heavy scars of fierce street-to-street battles and left roads cratered, houses and buildings pulverized, and schools destroyed. As I said earlier, they destroyed many girls' schools, and Ria Khan says many of the girls were still too terrified to come back to school. And I started a committee with the help of the army and went from one house to another to convince the parents to send their daughters back to school. Luckily today there are 262 pupils enrolled in her school, more than before the Taliban came to Swat. I think that's pretty amazing that they were able to make that progress with the schools, and a lot of it actually has to do with the influence that Malala had. And at this time, all of the fighting was over, and basically all of the villagers had returned, but their life remained suspended because their harvest was spoiled. There still was very little power in many areas. one man said, we are orphans. He was a school principal, and he said, no one has come to ask about us. And this was in the upper Swat Valley, while urban areas farther south had come back to life more or less. The real test of Pakistan's fight against Taliban in the Swat took place in that upper Swat Valley, where there were a lot of impoverished village, and that is where the militant movement had begun. Although the Taliban was driven out of the Swat, their shadow still remains. Political elders and leaders of anti-Taliban peace committees of Swat are key targets of the Taliban because they condemned the atrocities of the Taliban during their reign and assisted law enforcement agencies in the operation against militants, said Safarullah Khan, a leader of an anti-Taliban volunteer force in the Kabul area of Swat. Although most of the Swati people believe that the Taliban would not be able to win control of the region, the threat of further attacks haunts many residents. Politicians in Swat, such as Sher Shan Khan, a member of parliament from Swat, says that the Taliban's power has been greatly diminished since 2009. The Taliban are not in a position to regain control in Swat and will restrict their battle to hit-and-run tactics. The Swat Valley continues to go back to normal, but they will always have a scar from the presence of the Taliban. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. These are my sources. Thank you.